Hi students, so this is the Plants Life project. This is the final project for Diversity of Life, and it's the final week of Diversity of Life. So it's your chance to show what you've learned about plants and also use your creativity to write basically like a story, a children's story about a plant and their life and what that would be like. And so you need to make sure you include the things that we've studied in class. So not only just the basics of what a plant's life would be like, but how does it get its basic needs met? How does it get water? How does it get energy? How does it reproduce? So those are the three things you're going to make sure you need to include in your story. So you can tinker with this and make it look however you want. Get to this one. You already, I'm sure, have gotten to this one, Schoology. You can either use the sentence starters in the slides to tell your story, or you could delete the sentence starters and write your own story about a plant's life. Let's just pop this down here. You're going to need to add a picture or illustration to each slide. Edit and format the slides as you like. The story must include how the plant gets water, transpiration, how the plant gets energy, food, photosynthesis, how the plant reproduces. So that includes pollination, fertilization, and seed dispersal. Okay, I turned the light on so I'm not in the dark anymore. Okay, so yeah, that's what you need to include, and then you're going to record a flip grid of yourself reading your story. So here are the sentence starters. And so they try to make it really easy for you to tell your story. Once upon a time, there was a type of plant named blah, blah, blah. So come up with a type of plant you want to have your story be about and give it a name. And then create a setting for it. So where does it live? What's something that was unique about it? And you can feel free to be creative here. So for example, in my story, it's about a cactus named Lettuce. And it lives in the desert. It's a saguaro cactus. It's one of those big cacti, which I'm a big fan of because they're pollinated by a ton of different animals, including bats. And I think that's pretty cool. So you'll have the drawing, picture, and information about your plant. Okay, the next slide. One day, plant's name felt thirsty, so this is where you need to talk about transpiration. And if you don't remember what that is, you need to use your resources. Okay, I actually don't expect you to remember all the details of it. So please look back at the notebook, or if you don't have the notebook done, you can look back at the FOSS Web articles, and they'll all be linked on the resources slide below. So that'd be slide 12. Okay, so use your resources. I don't expect you to remember all the parts of it, but I do expect you to use your resources to have some good sciencey stuff in here about how the plant gets water. Okay? After it took a long, refreshing drink, plant's name felt hungry, so plants don't eat a cheeseburger, do they? They get their energy by making it themselves through something called photosynthesis. So how does that work? They don't just slurp up sunlight. They have to take in other substances. What do plants breathe in? What do they take in? Think about that. And if you're stuck on that, look at the notebook about photosynthesis or the articles on FOSSWeb. Springtime came and plant's name thought, I'm awesome, there should be more of me, so it started to. And this is where it starts reproduction. And the way that most plants start reproduction is they make flowers. So this slide should talk about your plant starting to make some flowers. It's springtime. What's in a flower? Think about it. Pollen. Okay, remember, those are the male reproductive cells or sperm cells. What else is in a flower? Ovules, or inside the ovary, which are eggs. So that's the female reproductive part of the flower. And if you forget all of this, you got to look back at what we studied. We spent a whole week on this. Okay, so look back at your resources if you're stuck. So thinking about how a plant does reproduction and doing a little research so that you can add some sciencey details to it. Here's where you can talk about pollination. a friendly pollinator came and helped out your plant by taking pollen from one plant and bringing it to your plant, or something like that, in order to be able to actually provide for the next slide, which is fertilization. Inside the flowers, what happens when the pollen grain travels down that little pollen tube? It can fertilize an ovule or an egg. And when it fertilizes an egg, that's basically reproduction. Sperm and an egg just come together, and now you have half plus a half equals one whole. And that whole new thing is a whole complete cell that will start to divide and turn into a baby plant, an embryo inside of a seed. Okay? So inside the flower, that's where the seeds are going to develop. And that's what's going to turn into a fruit. So if it's an apple flower, once it's been pollinated and fertilized, inside the flower, the seeds start to develop, and the flower usually sort of closes and dies and gets weird, but the fruit starts to grow there where the flower was. And inside that fruit are the seeds, which we all know that inside an apple there are seeds. That's because the flower that was there was pollinated and fertilized. So we're telling that story. It's a big deal in a plant's life. It's basically the goal of a plant's life. Okay, then comes seed dispersal, what does that mean? Seed dispersal. It's when the seeds are spread about. How do seeds get spread about? Well, most trees, not most, but many trees package their seeds in something that is very tasty. So think about that. Why are so many fruits so tasty? Because it's a reward for an animal to munch on it and then bring the seeds somewhere else and maybe poop them out again in a completely different environment where there's no competition from the parent plant. So that's what seed dispersal is. It basically is when usually an animal, but sometimes the wind, carries the seeds away so that they might be able to grow somewhere else in a suitable environment. So when plants named seeds were ready and the fruit was ripe, a helpful animal that eats fruit did something, munched, crunched, slurped. The animal that eats fruit walked away or flew away, and its droppings, poop, maybe became fertilizer for a new plant. Here's your last slide. After many years of growing, eating, drinking, and reproducing, plant's name, maybe it dies. Maybe it turns into I don't know. Maybe it gets cut down and it becomes a child's rocking chair. And you can do like a Pixar ending to your story. Okay? So once you have all of your story and all your pictures, you'll get on Flipgrid and record. Here are the resources I was talking about. All of our notebooks are great resources, unless you haven't been doing the notebooks, which most people have. But if you haven't been doing the notebooks, then you should use these articles as your resources. The Making of a New Plant is about reproduction. Water, Light, and Energy is about transpiration and photosynthesis. And then here are just a bunch of pictures that you might be inspired by. It's also important to look at the rubric. So if you're going about your work and you're like, oh yeah, cool, I didn't have to look at resources at all, I would probably question if you've done everything on the rubric, because it does ask for you to include some sciencey stuff. So look at this rubric before you submit. Did you include what's required and what's created for photosynthesis? Did you include the role of organs and tissues for transpiration? Did you explain plant reproduction and all these steps? Make sure you did, especially if you want that 4 out of 4. Okie dokie. So email me if you need help. Remember, these projects are very important to do. It's important to try it, even if you're turning it in late. 2 out of 4 is a passing grade. Even if you get half of this done, it's very important to at least attempt these projects because they are worth a big part of your grade, more so than the regular notebooks. because it gives you a chance to show your learning. So let me know if you need any help, and I will see you soon.